name's Caitlin Reisma. I'm from Backus-Page House Museum, and I'm here with Margaret Lang. We're at the Royal Oak home, and it's May 31st, 2022. So I guess we'll start off just with your full name.
Do you want me to say that?
Yes, please.
Margaret Rose Lang, and people call me Peggy.
Perfect. And where and when you were born?
I was born on March the 8th, 1936 in St. Thomas, Amasa Wood Hospital.
Oh, wow. So I live in Fingal, so yeah, Amasa Woods had a house there, and he owned a lot of the land there, actually.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So I love asking people how they got their first names. Like, was it a traditional first name in your family, or?
I don't know whether it was traditional or not, but my Rose is my grandmother's name. But Margaret, I'm not sure. And then why they called me Peggy, I'll never know. She said that's because that's in the English dictionary. The short form for Margaret's Peggy. So I said, okay, that's the way it is. That's the way it is.
We'll get into a bit about your ancestry if you know anything about it. So do you know where your ancestors came from?
On my dad's side, they came from Scotland and Devonshire in England.
Perfect. Do you know when they came over?
1700 and something, and they settled in Ancaster.
Okay, nice. How long were they in Ancaster for?
Oh, you got me there. It's been a while since I read. I've got a book here someplace amongst all the others. I'll have to look that up.
Sounds good.
And then they went to Tilbury, my grandfather did, and my great-grandparents. And then from Tilbury, they came to St. Thomas. And my grandparents, Rose and my dad, John Gilbert, grandfather, he had a store on Talbot Street about where Urick's Pharmacy is now. And he had a horse and a tea wagon. And he went all through the country here selling tea, with this horse-drawn big teapot. And it was called Lang's Tea. So he knew a lot of the county.
Yeah.
And they had 10 children.
Wow.
And Dad was about number 6, I think.
Wow. And all of them survived to adulthood?
All survived, and they all left St. Thomas, and 5 of them became American citizens because they did that back then. And then so Dad stayed here, and then he married my mother, Gladys Pearl Arthur. She lived on West Ave, and he was my grandfather on my mother's side was a blacksmith at the PM Railroad, and he was a great baseball player. So then my mother and dad had 3 girls, and I'm the youngest.
Wow.
And Geraldine, she married Lynn Smith, and he was the head of, he was technical director for the Elgin County Board of Education. And then my Dorothy Hipley married Ken Hipley, and they were Holstein farmers and lived on the Edgware Road.
Amazing. So you probably got picked on a lot by your sisters being the youngest then.
Oh yeah, that's the story of my life. And I think it's the story of everyone's life.
Yeah.
Were you picked on by your family?
Yeah, I'm the youngest too. So.
Oh boy, I understand.
Yeah. So there were 5 people in your family then?
5.
In your family? Nice. What were your parents' occupations?
Both of them worked on the New York Central Railroad. Mother was in the office, and then she married Dad, and she stayed home. They built a house on Forest Ave, 127 Forest Avenue, when they got married, and they moved in about 3 months after. It took about 3 months, and then they lived there for 54 years.
Wow.
And then when they had to give that up, they moved to Terrace Lodge in Aylmer.
I see. So you've pretty much lived in the same place then, most of
We lived, yes,
childhood?
I lived in the same house till I was about 25. And when I finished high school, I went to Arthur Voden Secondary School. And when I graduated from there, I went right into the City Hall.
Wow.
And I worked in the health unit, first with the public health dentist, and then I was in the office for the medical officer of health, which was the dentist was Dr. Colburn. We went and toured all the schools in the county and checked the children's teeth and see how they were. And 2 areas, I think, in Elgin County had fluorine in the water, and the others didn't. And so he did a survey about how it affected the children's teeth. And then I moved over to in the main office at the health unit, and Dr. Hoffman was the medical officer of the health there.
I see.
And then there came an opening in the health and welfare, or in the welfare department in the city hall, and that was Mr. Stokes, Ken Stokes, and so I went there with him, and I stayed there until 61. And then after all those years in the health unit, or in the city hall, I decided it was time for a change, so I took a holiday to London, England, to stay for 3 months, and I stayed nearly 2 years.
You liked it so much, huh?
I did like it, but I ran out of money and Mother got sick. Excuse me.
No problem. Wow. So, did you have like a place to say set up there, or were you just in like?
When I went there?
Yeah, in a hotel or?
Well, no. When I went there, stayed to all the YWCA's, Young Women's Christian Association,
Oh, I see.
YWCA, and then I went and tried different jobs. I just had one other. I worked in a clothing firm in an office, but I was the only one. It was a dark, dingy little place. So I got fed up and I went down to the Ontario government's office and I said I'd like a job. And the man that was there knew Mr. Sparling, that was the industrial commissioner here in St. Thomas. So anyways, he says, go on over to the Canada House and see what they can do. So I went over there and I got the job right away.
Wow.
They hired me as soon as I came and went in.
Amazing.
So I stayed there nearly 2 years. I worked for Mr. Rochon, which was the second top man in the commercial division, which is trade and commerce. Mm-hmm. And I stayed there, and then the last 6 months, I switched over to be the receptionist and librarian there, so that people would call up and ask all kinds of questions about industry in Canada. I had all the information there. I was in the library. And I liked it, but the pay was terrible. And they said if I had gone back to school and be fluent in French, then I could have, applied for the civil servant's job. But I didn't, because I came back home. Mm-hmm. And then I got a job here with the Canadian Manpower. And then this job came open at school to teach slow learners and physically handicapped children business. So I applied and went down to the University of Toronto, tried a test, passed the test, and got the job in Brantford, and I stayed for 27 years.
Wow.
And then I retired, and before I retired, I bought a house. And the lot was 69 by 136, and that's a lot of gardening. And then my 2 hips gave out, so that I'd have them replaced. So that kept me grounded. But I traveled a lot, so I've done very well, I think.
I'd say so. You've done a lot.
Yeah, I'm really pleased. And all these pictures, the different things that I've had, a lot of them are that I had here of Elgin County. Mm-hmm. And so when I came home, it just seemed like a natural thing. And when I arrived here, my sister sent me a beautiful big bouquet, and she says, "Welcome home." I thought that was really nice. And see, during the time I helped with the Mohawk Chapel, and I wrote to the Queen and told her how we were doing, and I wrote to her about different topics, and Prince Philip. And there's when she came to the Mohawk Chapel, and I got some letters.
Amazing.
So I've been very fortunate. And I was fortunate I had a good background here. Mm-hmm. I loved Elgin County.
Yeah, it's a great place.
It is. And one of the sad things, though, is that I feel is that they should never have closed that Ontario Hospital there on number 4 highway, because a lot of people needed the help. Mm-hmm. That was a bad, and I wrote hundreds of letters to do something about it, but it didn't do any good.
Yeah.
Well, the people were nice. They sent some nice replies, but nothing ever happened.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yes. So when I lived here in St. Thomas, we went to Trinity Anglican Church on the corner of Southwick Street and Wellington Street. It's now a mosque. So they sold it. So anyway, one of the ladies there was Gladys Elliott, and she was my GA, the Girls Auxiliary leader. And her dad was the minister at St. Peter's in Tyrconnell.
Wow.
So this window right here, the east window on the south side by the chancel, that's in memory of George Eliot. And that was her father, and he was the minister here. And he was going home one day, I think it was, I'm not sure, but I think it was the winter. Anyways, the horse got spooked and he bucked, and Mr. Eliot fell off the wagon and was killed.
Oh, no.
So Gladys moved into St. Thomas, and she lived on the corner of Metcalf Street and Victoria in St. Thomas. And I visited her until she lived, I think, to be 104.
Wow.
So when I came back, after I moved to Brantford, I came back and forth. I always went to see Miss Elliott and Mr. Kavanaugh, that used to be the principal at Arthur Bowden. So Mr. Elliott had 3 children, and one was Claude, and then there was another boy, and I forget his name, and then Gladys. And Gladys was the social editor of the St. Thomas Times Journal. So they used to, every week at the end back page, they would have, you know, so-and-so had tea, or they went someplace, or they, you know, social column. They don't do that anymore because people could go in and steal your things. But anyways, people are lucky to even read the paper anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, Claude, the one boy, went to University of Toronto, to Trinity College, and he was going to go through for an Anglican minister like his father. But the First World War broke out.
Right.
So he signed up, and he was a friend of Ellis Sifton's. So one of the letters that Ellis wrote in his book, it said that I'm looking for my friend Claude, but they were both killed. I think that was sad.
Very sad.
So anyways, that's the story of that window. But Gladys, you can call up the archives here, and they got a lot of her articles. She had some wonderful articles, and she had beautiful slides, and she'd speak on different topics. She went to Ireland and all over, and she knew all that about Thomas Talbot and the whole bit. So I had a good introduction to this part of the county from Gladys.
Yeah, it's amazing. Sounds like she lived a very long and happy life.
She was a lovely lady.
Yeah.
You know, she did a lot of good. Anyway, there you are.
So were your parents a part of any like clubs or like?
Well, my dad ran for. He was a public utilities commissioner. He ran in civic elections. He was a public utilities commissioner for 34 years. He ran in elections, won every time. When he got to be 70, he retired. He said he held a meeting with himself, and the consensus of the opinion was that he was going to retire, and he did. And that was smart thing to do at 70.
Yeah.
He had other things he wanted to do. Well, he did that, and we worked hard at Trinity. He used to do the breakfast every Sunday, or once or twice a month. In the morning, he and Mr. Clements, or John Clements, they'd get the breakfast ready, and after church, the early church, was really nice. We worked hard there. He was superintendent of the Sunday school, and Mother taught us all. Mother was a wonderful gardener, wonderful. And we couldn't work in the garden. She only let us cut grass and weed. And Dad was against pesticides and all that. He gave us all a little hook and said, get out there and get rid of the weeds. And in those days, when your dad told you to get out there and do it, you got out there and did it.
It must have taken a long time.
Yes, it did. Of course, in those days, our lot was only 40 feet wide by 110. And then when I bought my house, it was 69 by 136, and it was a lot more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Did your mom do any canning or anything?
Well, Mother used to she used to speak before she got married. She had taken a lot of elocution lessons. And she would speak, but after she got married, she just gave it all up. I think raising 3 girls was enough.
Yeah.
And with Father was a well, I wouldn't say he's a firebrand, but he had more energy. It was exhausting sometimes. And he'd plant a big garden, and then he'd want us to weed it all. So he said one time, he says, he despaired that we'd ever do garden. I said, well, you browbeat us too much. I used to kid, you browbeat us. And, but anyways, we all turned out to be good gardeners. But he kept after us. So anyways, Forest Avenue was a nice street. And right down at the end, it was Elma College.
Right.
So we were lucky.
So where did you go to elementary school?
Myrtle Street School.
Myrtle Street?
Yeah, went up the back alley and down Myrtle Street for 2 blocks, and it was no trouble at all.
Nice.
The whole 3 of us went there, because you see, we never moved. They lived there for 54 years on that 127 Forest.
Wow.
And then from there we went to Arthur Voden. I would like to have gone to the collegiate. My father says, no, you need a good business education, and you need to learn how to be a good homemaker and balance the books. Well, I don't know if I got to balance the books, but I was never a great homemaker. Anyway, this place is nice. I'm glad that I collected all these pictures in China and everything.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It makes it feel really homey.
Yeah, it makes it like home.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the teachers you had at Myrtle Street?
Yeah, we had Miss Chamberlain in grade 1. And I don't know, that was Rennick or 2. And then grade 3, I had Miss Calvert. And then Miss Canning. And Mrs. Waterman. And I had Hugo Dome for the principal. And then I went to Arthur Voden.
Nice. How big were the class sizes there?
Oh, they must have been 30.
30? How many classes did they have at Myrtle?
Well, they had 4, 8, 12 rooms. There were 12 classrooms. It was a good school.
Yeah.
And during the war, they asked us all to go out, and collect milkweed pods. And they took all of the milkweed. They had big cartons in the hallway by the principal's office. And we put the milkweed pods in there. And then they sent the milkweed pods off to someplace in Michigan. And they made life belts for soldiers because they couldn't get the silk because of the war. So they used the silk in the milkweed pods, and that would keep a sailor up in the water for so many hours, for the life belt. I forget what they said, how many hours. Anyways, that was, and then we used to have different dues. Everybody had. In the basement, you had lunches and things in the basement, or everybody canned goods in those days.
Right.
Everybody had a fruit cellar. Everybody had a coal bin. And then we would have corn roasts, and everybody would gather, and they'd have fire drills. Like I remember one time, the firemen. I was in the 2nd floor. They came up the ladder and took me down when I was a kid, took me down the ladder at night. I was scared out of my wits, but anyway. Anyway, we had a lot of, the neighbors were all good. We knew every neighbor. We knew everybody on the block. Of course, nobody had a car. We had to give up our car because we didn't have rubber tires. They had to take the rubber tires. So you walked every place.
Right.
And one thing that was nice about when we used to go to Trinity every Sunday at Christmas time, or when there was a snow or an ice storm, you'd walk home and you'd walk down Forest Ave and all the trees would meet. It was like walking through a cathedral. It was beautiful.
Wow. It sounds, I can just picture it.
And then they used to have band tattoos at Pinafore Park, and they were marvelous. You know, see all those pipers come up the fields. There were 600 one time.
Wow.
Oh, it was beautiful. They used to have that every year. My cousin that used to come from Michigan. He'd say, "There's Pinafore Park, the closest place you can get to heaven on this earth." Oh my gosh. Anyway.
Now, back then, were people allowed to swim in the little river by Pinafore?
At Pinafore?
Yeah.
Well, I know in I think about 1912 again that they had a boat and it sunk during one of the deuce and some of the children were drowned. But we used to skate on Pinafore Lake, and they had, I think it was Babcock's, had a little house where they saw, you know, a little restaurant there too, and we went in there and changed our skates. It was nice. They'd clear it all off. But in our own backyard, my dad made a skating rink, and we would skate in our own backyard. Like he'd go out there, excuse me, they would go out there and, you know, he'd freeze it. He'd have to look after that every night to get it smooth and that. Did a good job.
Yeah. You kids must have had fun on that.
Yes, we did.
So you went to Arthur Bowden.
Yes.
Did you go for 4 or 5 years?
4 years then.
4 years. Do you remember what classes you took?
Well, we had Miss Cole and Mary Bell Edmondson. She was history. And I had Mr. Kavanaugh for, he came for math sometimes. And Mr. Campbell for geography. Mary Bell Edmondson for history, and Miss Davis for homemaking, and Margaret Price for sewing.
Wow.
I can't remember any of the others.
Do you remember what your favorite class was?
I like geography.
Geography?
Yeah, I like that.
Nice. So then immediately after that, you didn't go to post-secondary, correct? You went straight to the...
I went straight to the city hall.
Amazing.
Yes.
So were you involved in any like extracurricular activities at school? Were you part of any clubs during your time?
Well, no, because a lot of the students in those days went home on the bus, so we just came home, or I rode my bicycle to school, or sometimes I walked. And then my older sister, Geraldine, she was the head secretary there.
Oh, wow.
So some of the teachers would pick her up, in later years they just took me along too. So I was fortunate that way. But I belonged to the St. Thomas Field Naturalist Club. And Fred and Corona Lewis used to take me to different dues. And Mother and Dad's, it all started in the, you know where the engineer's office is now in the city hall, behind the city hall. That was the Carnegie Library. And there was children's library downstairs, and then upstairs it was the adult library. And when we went down, Mother and Dad used to take us to the children's library, and then they'd have these story hours. And it was really nice. It was a beautiful place. I thought that was the most enchanting place I had ever been. And then, of course, I loved when I got older to go upstairs because they had rooms with big tables. And then they had all the newspapers from all over there, and you could pick up a newspaper and read the news from all over the world.
Wow.
It was lovely. I was really sorry when they did away with that library because it was such a beautiful building.
Yeah. Do you remember, like, your recess time or sports that your elementary school would do?
I don't remember, but I know we used to play a lot of baseball. We used to go to the Michigan Central Park often. Dorothy was a real baseball fanatic, and I'd go with her because she was older than I. She'd take me. And then every Saturday afternoon we went to the movies. Mother sent us off to the movies, either the Granada Theater or the Capitol Theater.
Wow.
And I thought she she was trying to give us a bigger education, but sometimes I think about it back now, I think she was glad to get rid of us sometimes. Anyways, we had a good time. We went to a lot of shows, and I love all those classic movies.
Mm-hmm.
I still watch them.
Do you remember some of the movies that you saw at the theater?
I remember we saw The Red Shoes, but we used to watch Roy Rogers and Gene Autry a lot. And, you know, they used to have cereals like Tarzan. They'd have cereals like Naoki or someone, I forget her name was. Anyway, they'd have a cereal. And then it'd be, they cut her up in the saw, will she fall off the cliff? And then they say, come back next week and find out what happens. So they left you hanging for a week, so they get you back in the next week.
Yeah. And I bet your mom was fine with sending you off the next week.
Well, she was probably out there gardening.
Yeah.
I used to say to Father, you know, we cut the lawn and weed. And someone said, later I worked for Participation House in Brantford. And someone said, you know, we really need a whole row of flowering crabs along there. I said, no way, you're not putting flower. I said, you've got to get something that puts on a good show and low maintenance. And I said, I've already raked up 2 million bushels of flowering crabs from our own backyard. I'm not raking up any more crab apples. They looked at me, they didn't know what I was talking about, but I did.
Wow, so you are part of the Naturalist Club for how many years?
Well, I'm still a member, but I haven't been there for 60 years, but I give out a lot of brochures. You know, Mr. Spicer that lived on Fingal, or no, he lived up there on that line into Shedden. He lived at Shedden.
Yeah.
Well, he did did all that work at Fingal Wildlife Management Area during the war. So he has two brochures, what it was like during the war and what it's like now. And I will give you a pile of those because I still give those out.
Yeah.
And then in the St. Thomas Field Naturalist, I didn't know. See, I left here in '61 and I never really came back until now. I mean, I was back and forth the weekends and when mother and dad were alive. But anyway, there you are. I came back, but I haven't gone to the meetings. But they used to have some wonderful speakers, and we did the bird census. You know, they did those every year, and people would come there. Is it 5 to 11 already? We've been talking an hour nearly. Goodness. Anyway, they would come. They went away, and when they came home, everybody'd come to the bird count. And then when we did it quite a few years, we started the nature club, and then we were in the library. But then they had Christmas potluck dinner after the 26th of December, and we were at St. Andrews. And Marshall Field was the head of it then, and all of that group, Gord Auckland and the Wall, his name, and you know, Mr. Foster and there were a whole lot, and Fred and Corona Lewis and Dolly and Marshall Field and all their family. So it was really nice. It's nice to see everybody again. John Lemon and a lot of the youngers, and they had a lot of younger people there too. They don't now, but I hear they don't now. But of course, with COVID, you don't even know whether they'll ever, you know, they had to stop having the meetings. So everything's changed.
Yeah.
Change. The only constant is change.
Yeah, exactly. So, do you remember any like big weather events that happened in the area growing up? Like big snowstorms or tornadoes, that kind of thing?
Well, I know that Dad was the honorary chairman of the Jumbo Committee. His name's on the plaque there. And Jumbo died September 15th, 1885. And they had an old boys reunion in 1935, and Dad was in charge of the decorations That was before I was born. But anyway, they put those big tin elephants. I don't know if you've seen them out there in the Elgin Heritage Center. There's a big red tin elephant. Well, they put those on the post down Talbot Street. First night, and the next people shimmied up the posts and stole them all. So they did it the next night, put them back up, and they were gone. And by the third night, they'd taken them all.
Wow.
And they cost $1 a piece to make them in those days.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we heard. So we and then we worked on that. We helped Father with that, and that, and the nature club, and with the garden. And Dad was in the St. Thomas Horticulture Society. He was president, but Mother was the real gardener.
Right.
She knew all of the plants and she'd get out there. She really was a smart lady.
So plants and vegetables then, I take it?
What's that?
Like flowers and vegetables?
She did flowers.
Flowers?
Father wanted us to have vegetables, and we planted a lot of vegetables, and we did that, but that was off of our property. We had places someplace else that we'd rent for that.
Yeah. So you mentioned that they, would steal the elephants off the lamppost. Would you say the community was fairly safe, low crime, or?
Well, I worked in the city hall.
Right.
And we went to Trinity Church, which is a mile or more from our home. We had to go down Forest and down to Ross and then down Wellington to the church. But we walked back and forth, and I'd go out at night sometimes, even after I started to work, with my girlfriends, and we'd walk home after 9 o'clock. We'd gone to the first show, sometimes even up to 11 if we stayed a little longer. We walked down the street, and we never thought a thing about it.
Yeah.
We just did it, and it was nice, and all the people would be sitting on their porches because it's hot in the summertime. Hi, Mr. Sterling. Hi, Mrs. Sterling. Hi, Mrs. Ross. Hi, Mrs. So-and-so, all the way down the street,
Yeah.
And you just didn't think about that.
Yeah.
It was just another world.
That's nice. It's nice to, trust the community and everything. So would your family participate in holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving?
Oh yes, we had, and we went to church, and Dad used to get Tommy Thomas, who was an agriculture minister. He would donate when we used to decorate the church. The Anglicans always decorated for harvest service. It's harvest Thanksgiving service. It usually was about the third week or fourth week in September. It wasn't Thanksgiving weekend, it was harvest Thanksgiving. So we decorate the whole church. And my sister married Ken Hepley, and they lived on a farm, so Dad would go out and get corn stalks, and we'd wrap them around the pillars at Trinity. And then Mr. Thomas, he would send in a couple of bushels of apples. Mr. What was his name? Lived down at the bottom of ponds down there. He donated pumpkins. He put in a field of pumpkins, pie pumpkins. The difference between pie pumpkins and jack-o'-lantern pumpkins. The pie pumpkins are smaller and sweet.
Right.
So, anyways, and we put them in the window, and they took the vine off the side of the church, and they wrapped that around. So we had apples and the pumpkins and the vines, and then people would put other things, cucumbers, carrots, beets, everything. And the whole church was decorated for harvest. It was beautiful.
Wow.
But every Anglican church did that. But now they don't do that. They just have something on Thanksgiving weekend. And I said it's a discrimination against women because women usually looked after the meal, for Thanksgiving weekend, and then everybody would go to aunties or grandmas or somebody's, and a lot of people would come. I said when they had harvest Thanksgiving, everybody contributed, and everybody went to harvest. Then on Thanksgiving, if you were busy, fine. If you weren't, everybody came to church, but that was Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks later than this harvest Thanksgiving. Too bad they changed it.
Yeah.
Change, the only constant is change.
Yeah, exactly. So do you know when the house that you lived in St. Thomas was built?
1926.
1926. Amazing. So when did your parents, do you know the year that your parents first lived there?
Well, they moved in just after they were married.
So when was that?
1926, I think.
So were they both from St. Thomas originally?
Well,
or?
yeah, Dad was, because I said his father went from, well, their ancestors came from England and Scotland, and they landed in Ancaster, and then they went to Tilbury, and then he came to St. Thomas, my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And then they lived on Hiawatha Street. I think it was 159 or anyways, a double house on Hiawatha Street.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived there. And then mother, and then when they got married, Dad and Mother got married, they moved on to, they got this lot. And it was everything down practically past Third Ave out, there was just fields.
Mm-hmm.
And then that slowly got built up, and it got built up almost to First Ave.
Wow.
But now it's it goes right up to Fairview, way up higher.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how your parents met?
Well, they met in the railroad, because they were both of them could type like mad.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just like that, and they could really type.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, we all learned how to type. And then I sent all these letters. I had 3-4 typewriters before I moved in here. And I gave them all away. I gave one to the Canadian Military Heritage Museum in Brantford. And then I gave one away to a man, he's going to get it fixed. And the other 2 I gave to another man at church. But I had a correcting selectric, and it just broke my heart to give that away. But I needed to get them serviced. And the trouble is, there's no more serviceman.
Yeah.
And that although they're bringing back old typewriters for people for physically handicapped or something, because when you type, you had to, with the manual machine, mm-hmm. you had to have 14 pounds pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But when now with a computer, you're like this.
So light, yeah.
3 ounces. So that was enough to drive all those poor old ladies that had banged all those years on the typewriter.
So did most of your family live in the St. Thomas area then?
Yeah, they never left it.
Yeah. So
Dorothy got married and she moved out to Edgware Road. Hipley's had a farm there.
Okay.
And then Geraldine, she married Len, and they built a house, and they lived on First Ave their whole married life.
Wow.
Except for a couple of months before they moved in.
Right. You mentioned you had cousins in Michigan, I believe?
Oh, we had a lot of, Dad came from a family of 10. Mother didn't have any relatives. We didn't see them. They were in London. And we couldn't have a car during the war. But Dad's family came home now and then, and we went to visit them because Dad had a pass on the railroad. So we went to Boston. We went to Buffalo quite often. And Dad had 2 sisters in Fort Erie, and their husbands both were in the First World War. And then Dad had a sister in Detroit, and a brother in Boston, a brother in Akron, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So they were spread around.
So you traveled quite a bit then?
Just on the railroad, because we had the pass.
Right.
And then one uncle lived near Indianapolis. So we used to go down there sometime in May and go to the Indianapolis trials, when they're racing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like.
And then we went to baseball games. I saw Yogi Berra, and we went to Cincinnati. Of course, they were all baseball nuts. Sports crazy in the family. I guess that's the way it is in some families.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. That would have been pretty cool to experience.
It was interesting.
Yeah. So you've talked a bit about the First World War and a bit about the Second World War. Did any of your family members fight?
Well, Dad was in the reserves, the Elkin Regiment here, but none of us did because we were too young, all girls. But we did we did those things like Mother would, everybody was rationed. She would talk to us about what we could have and what we couldn't have, to buy butter and sugar and so on. But they had 80,000 air crew people come to the OH here during the war. It was a technical training center where the OH is now, sits empty. Well, often Mother and Dad would invite one or two airmen for dinner. And so we'd sit around the dining room table and they would tell us about Australia, New Zealand, or wherever it was like that. It was interesting.
Yeah.
One air crew airman said to my dad, don't you think that you're taking a big risk inviting men that you don't know anything about here for your dinner? And Father says, not any more of a risk than you're taking for us. So that was about it.
So you mentioned that you had to give your car away during the war times.
Yeah.
What are some of the other changes? Like, how did it impact your life?
I guess to make the decisions to what to do next, that was the big change. I hated to leave. I liked the city hall, but after I started 54 until 61, I decided I need to get out and see something else, or I'd heard everybody's problems. Because we were in that time, we were doing I'd been the health, and it moved out, the health unit. Of course, they're the big building down there on Talbot Street now, but they've moved 3 times since we were in the city hall. And then there was the city market, the dog pound, and the welfare that we looked after, and all the signs on the street had to be licensed for insurance purposes. So we did all that too.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. There were a lot of nice people in the city hall, and the city engineer was Warren Miller. He was there a long time, and he was one of the leading lights at Trinity Church too. He sat 2 pews in front of us. So it wasn't that and Dad knew everybody because he was a public utilities commissioner. So when I got the job, it was that I didn't know anybody. I knew quite a few people, and then Mother got ill, and then so I went out with Father. If they had any dinner or anything, I'd go with them. So that was about it.
Yeah. Did your dad's side of the family, were they involved in World War I at all? Or?
Oh yes, like the 2 in Fort Erie, they were in the medical corps. They went over. They were from Scotland. Both of them were from Scotland. Came to Canada, and the one uncle sang in the choir at Elma Street Presbyterian Church. That since ripped down that church, but he sang in the choir. And my aunt went to church one time, and she says, I looked up and I saw this man in the choir, and she says, that's the man I'm going to marry. And she did. Anyway, then they went to Fort Erie, and he went overseas, both of them, and they trained in tents at Niagara-on-the-Lake, and they went overseas. Then my one uncle Jack, he was the first phys ed director at University of Western Ontario, John Gilbert Lang. Then he went to Montreal, and he was in charge of physical education for the Protestant schools in Montreal. So he was in both wars, trained. Then Al, that went to Boston, he became an American citizen, and he became a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he's buried in Arlington Cemetery there in Washington, or in Virginia. Then Victor, he was in reconnaissance in the First World War, and in Belgium and that. He never talked. None of them ever talked about it. None of them. So, and then of course my aunt married Mitchener, Albert Mitchener, and he went to a superintendent in Detroit, and he was in charge of all the trains. You know, during the war, there were hundreds of trains that went through here, practically caboose to engine, going through with tanks and jeeps and everything, you know, from Detroit to send them to New York and then ship them across the sea. You see, they instead of going away around Lake Erie, they'd come through Canada and cut off a couple of days' travel.
Yeah.
They were stupid to do away with those trains, in my opinion, but that's life, full of complexities.
So what changes to the area have you noticed? Like
there were only 23,000 or so when I left. Now what is it up to? I don't know. It's huge now.
Yeah.
And then there was the big department store, Anderson's. It was just a wonderful, wonderful store. You could get everything there. Mrs. Dennett, she looked after all the beauty and everybody used to use Elizabeth Arden, that bluegrass cologne. And they had beautiful hats and coats. And there was a Mr. McCollum that used to sell coats there. He'd been in the First World War. He sold them to my grandmother, to my mother, and me. And we walk in and he said, I have just the coat for you. And he said, try these on and see what you think. So I tried them on, and then he'd go back to the first one. He said, that's it. And I said, you're right, that's it. He was wonderful. He lived into his 90s.
Wow.
At Anderson's. And then they had a lot of really nice stores. Gould's were across the street. It was another department store. Everybody shopped at Jennings. Still got beautiful things in there, but they cost a fortune. Anyway, all the way. And there was a store. Everybody went to market on Saturday. So there was a Sumner's candy store down there on Talbot Street near Horton Market.
Okay.
Everybody went there after they had great humbugs. Gee, they were good. It was a fascinating store. He was a wonderful man, old gentleman.
Where would you guys mostly get your groceries from? Was there like a certain store you always went to?
Well, in those days they had corner stores. We had Vennings were on Erie Ave, on Erie Street. And it was just a corner store, and everybody just ordered, and they wrote up the bill and put it in there. And then at the end of the month, or when you you paid the bill. So that we did most of our shopping there.
Right.
And it was only over on the next street, so we just walk.
Yeah.
Walk and carry it. And they didn't have all the stuff that they have now.
Is there any meals you remember eating growing up that were a constant kind of staple meal in your family?
Men all like roast beef and potatoes and carrots, that sort of thing. Mother made good chow. She made the best onion pie. She'd have, Dad had planted a lot of green onions, and they'd take those, and she made a pie crust in that, and then she some bacon and a couple of eggs and mix that all up in there, and then put a pie crust on it. Oh gosh, it was good. It was really good, especially with ketchup, and after that I don't eat ketchup after that. But that went on. But Dad was a wonderful cook. He started out when he left in high school. He worked for Wonder Bakeries on Princess Ave.
I see.
And so he was a good cook.
So who mostly made the meals in the house then? Was it a good mix of the two of your parents?
Oh, Mother did.
Yeah,
Mother
but your
did.
dad liked getting in the kitchen.
But Dad helped too.
Yeah.
He could do anything. So I was fortunate that way. They would say that the kids would talk, or later on they'd say, well, men don't do this, and I look at them and I think, well, I don't know what kind of household that you live in, because my dad did everything.
Yeah.
And he liked to vacuum. When Mother got sick, he'd just go right through the whole house.
Wow.
He was good.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Like it. It's very rare to see, the men in the house
Yeah.
You know, doing what's deemed as women's tasks.
I know. No, it didn't make any difference. Of course, my grandfather, I don't know, Dad went over, he got up at 5 o'clock every Thursday morning and went over to my grandmother's house and did her wash for her after, so to help her out.
Mm-hmm.
So he was a good man.
Yeah, a very helping family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did your family get the car back after the war?
Well, Geraldine bought the oldest girl bought a car.
Yeah.
We learned from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Father got a car, and then after, but it was quite a few years after the war.
Mm-hmm.
But we all walked. We didn't think anything of it in those days.
Yeah.
That's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
You do what you have to do.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember any of we'll talk about some of the first in your life. So do you remember the first phone you had?
The first film?
Telephone.
Oh, first telephone.
Yeah.
No, we used to, number please. They used to say number please.
Yeah, a lot of people we interview will tell stories about their party lines that they had.
Oh, yeah.
And how they would listen into their neighbors' conversations, or there was always that one neighbor who didn't talk to a lot of people and they just listened through the phone.
Everybody knew everybody else's business, I think. You had one key. Yeah, you locked the door, but everybody had the same key all the way down the street.
Wow.
So I said, I don't know why you have a key. And then they say, put the key under the mat. Well, I said, what good is that? Everybody knows you put the key under the mat. But, there was never any thief. There was any stealing that I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I was really naive, but I don't even remember them talking about it.
Yeah.
It was just not that, it was a different era.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember any big kind of accidents that happened, or business fires or house fires or anything?
I remember when First United Church burned, it was a heartache.
When did that burn down?
I don't know when it was, but I remember how everybody was so upset with it because it's such a beautiful church. And then they rebuilt it with the present one. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I remember when the war was over, my dad came home and saying, the war is over, the war. Of course, he had brothers that were overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So it made a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. Did you guys celebrate when the war was over?
I'm sure we did, but it would be just a picnic. You didn't have a lot of money. We never, and when we bought Christmas presents, we usually never spent more than $5 or $10 on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because you didn't have it.
Right.
And we didn't know that we didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
We always thought we were rich.
Yeah.
We were rich, but not when we were cash poor.
Yeah.
So.
Do you remember any of the presents that you got?
Oh, we always gave Dad. I always bought him ties and socks and things like that, and sometimes a cap and sort of things like that, and scarves. We went to Barnes Men's Store. That they rented the store where Urix is now, around there, and they had Barnes Men's Store, and that had been my grandfather's store.
Wow.
At one time. You see, remember I told you he sold tea and drove through the country with his horse-driven big teapot. It had the Lang's tea. And of course, in those days, they sold tea in chests.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so expensive that they'd have a little box that they locked. They put the tea in there and locked because they didn't want anybody to steal their tea because it's so expensive.
Right. Wow.
Well, so anyway, if we covered everything now?
We've covered a lot, yes. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I don't want to keep you here too long.
No, I gotta go. It's time for lunch.
Yeah.
Now listen, there's some things I want you to have. If you'll take them. I see that Oreo box there.
Yep.
Well, I got one here.